I'm a true believer that you can disrupt an industry, not just by technology, but you can disrupt it by how you run that organization and how you represent that industry, overall. And I said, well, we could do all of them. We could do it all better.
Welcome to From the Ground Up, the podcast where we delve deep into the inspiring stories of entrepreneurs and their journey to build successful startups. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, and in each episode, I sit down with the founders to learn about their experiences, the challenges they faced, the lessons they've learned, and the insights they've gained while turning their dreams into reality. I'm excited to have with us today Austin Mac Nab, founder of VizyPay. Welcome to the show, Austin.
Thanks for having me, Jake. I appreciate it.
Cool. So a little bit about Austin. He's an entrepreneur. He's built a payments platform, and I'll let him explain the details of exactly what it is that they're providing to the market. But really cool to know that in 2022, Austin won the CEO of the Year award at the Technology Association of Iowa, and was also a finalist for CEO of the Year for the Ernst & Young in 2022 as well. So Austin, I guess before we dive in here, welcome to the show. I know that proximity oftentimes influences the type of work you get into in your career. We're going to talk about you a little bit. Proximity-wise, when you grew up, what were the industries that were relative to where you lived, and did it have any, if any, influence at all on what you do today?
Well, I would say, my mom actually immigrated here from Vietnam, and I'm basically first generation. For our family, we kind of raised in the United States. And with that being said, what I was exposed to is a lot of factory kind of jobs, because that's kind of what my mom was. That was our opportunity limit, with English kind of being her second language, if you would, when she got here. Even today, she still speaks more, Vietnamese than she speaks, English, unless she's yelling at me, right? But other than that, so I was exposed to a lot of factory jobs, a lot of, work, long hours, and grind it out, and 7 days a week. And that's all I knew, because that's what my mom did. So she's a seamstress. She worked in the factory, with cable. She still works. She's 74 years old. She still works in one of them now. And she definitely doesn't know how to quit. But that's what I was exposed to industry-wise, man. Kind of that world of industrial. So.
God, that's great. Looking back as you grew up, what was your very first job you held as a kid?
Well, back then, we, when I was growing up, my mom and dad had divorced when I was a very young age, and my mom remarried, and my stepdad was, emotionally and occasionally physically abusive, kind of a shit show relationship, growing up. And, I didn't understand the meaning of money. I just knew we needed it. And the first job I went out and did, was actually selling egg rolls door to door, around 12 years old. I would take all the orders in these rich neighborhoods in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, back in the day, throughout the morning time and the late afternoon. I would let her know all the orders. She would make them towards the end of the night, and I would go back and deliver one by one. So that was my first job, in the world of just trying to what money was, and kind of how you kind of, you give me this, I give you that kind of concept for what you're doing. So.
That's crazy. Yeah, egg rolls is a big part of our family as well. And if you would have came by our house, I guarantee we would have bought some. You probably learned a lot about sales too. And that's probably the toughest job, I would say, is selling a product door to door, especially as a kid. I did the same when I was young, and you get the rejections, but you also learn a lot, what works, what doesn't work. When you kind of started getting into your career, what were the type of roles you started to work in? Was it sales? Walk me through that a little bit.
Well, there's a couple kind of versions of this. When you're a teenage, kid, kind of getting to adulthood, you're trying to just figure out life, right? So, my dad, my biological father, was in the Marine Corps for 21 years. He was never maybe physically there a lot, but he definitely was a phone call away. So he was involved to a certain extent. And, what I was used to with my mom, being in that world. So, and being in the world of a Vietnamese mother, it was always do good in school, be a doctor, be a lawyer, right? That's kind of what you're told to do and kind of raised to do. And that was my job for her. And then I also wanted to be in the military with my dad, right? So, as I kind of gradually got to that point, I was none of them. So I went totally opposite of everything my family has done. And when I got into sales, because this egg roll job got me into, selling door-to-door candy, and went to telemarketing. And then I went to, working in a movie theater. But then it was one of those moments that you felt like you have to move up in a company, right? So my mom always told me, work hard and hopefully you can move up, et cetera. That was part of it, minus the lawyer and the doctor comments. And so I worked at Best Buy and I thought, hey, for sure, I'm going to move up. I'm going to kill it. I'm going to be the shit, and I'm going to do big things. And I got into Best Buy and I was one of the youngest managers in their history at that time back in the day. And then I went to, GameStop and then I found this industry shortly thereafter, around 18 and a half, 19 years old. So I did a lot before I even got to, even 21, before I can even legally drink, right? So, and then once I found this industry, I never looked back. I didn't go in the military. I wanted to be a military police officer, believe it or not. And my dad would not let me go in the Marine Corps. He would only let me go in the Air Force. And once I started seeing money being made by just commissions and things you could do within the realm of sales, I ran with it and I stuck with it ever since.
So the payment space is what you're in today. How did you get into that in your career, going from a Best Buy, getting good at sales, getting an opportunity to work for a company? Was it a company within the payment processing space?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a crazy story because I remember leaving Best Buy, actually getting fired from Best Buy at that time. And then I went
Wait,
to
hold on. Let's stop there.
Yeah.
Let's stop there. How did that happen? It's important to know successes and failures here.
I got fired at Best Buy because, I was young and I was arrogant and, I thought I was just overconfident, right? And that obviously didn't rub people the right way. And I think I pissed off the wrong people and then I ended up losing a job. And that taught me a lot about, pick and choose battles and stuff like that over the years to come. But yeah, I mean, I got fired then, went to GameStop right after that. So.
Got it. And so GameStop, we know that it's a great company. It's a big company. Were you also in sales there? Did you go into management?
Yeah, actually, I was. I ran a couple stores for them. I opened one store, ran another, and during that time, kind of speaking about getting into the business of payments, I remember leaving my resume. I think back then, my Monster or Career Builder was a big thing back then. This is 18, 19 years ago, right? So I remember leaving my resume on there, and I would always get a call, and it always thought it was a telemarketer. Finally, one day I picked up, right, and I said, "Well, you guys keep calling me, so it got to be something, and I don't owe anyone any money, so hopefully it's not that." And they said, "Hey, we have this job. It's payments in the payment space, basically going door to door, and to talk to small business owners and basically help them with their processing needs. You want in or out?" And I said, "Fuck that, I'm not in at all because it's all commission. I don't want to do that." So I wanted that salary job. I thought making $31,000 a year at GameStop, I thought I was awesome. I was going to move up. I was going to kill it. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to go from making steady money to, a commission job. So I blew them off and I continued to blow them off for many and many months. And then finally, one day I picked up again and I said, all right, fine. I'll listen to your conference call. I'll listen to you guys sell me on the job. And I went through it and I said, all right, I'm going to do 1 day a week that I have off. I was working 6 days a week at that time. 1 day a week. The first day I went out, I just went to the first date, the spot where my wife and I went. At that time, my girlfriend, we went to when we first, had our first date. And I remember them. It was so easy. They signed up with me. They remembered who I was, and they signed up with me. And then they gave me their friend, and their friends gave me their friends. And then all of a sudden, I was like, well, shit, this is actually working. So 6 weeks later, I bought my first Mercedes and I thought it was awesome. I quit my GameStop and I went full bore into the payment space with my first company that I went with. So that's how the industry found me and kind of bugged me into it almost.
It's amazing. I don't know if everyone knows, I'm sure a lot do, that, if you're an adult and you have a credit card, for the most part, you've probably been through a payment processing experience where you give your credit card, a restaurant, a bar, bowling alley, whatever it is, takes your payment and you get charged a fee, or the company does, and that's the process. But it's a huge industry, and you've been in it for a long time. Walk me through how you've seen it when you started, and as you started thinking about building your own company, what's the problem you saw in that industry? I'm sure there's a few different ones, but what was the opportunity you saw that you felt like, let's take this opportunity and see if we can.
Well, I spent before, VizyPay just turned, 6 years old in April. So last month. So I was in the industry for about 12 years before, this kind of came about in April 2017. The industry, in my opinion, progressively got worse over the years I was in it, and honestly, I was part of the problem probably. I was naive to the things that were happening to small business owners in small or big cities. And as I kind of got older, and money was great, but at the same time, I didn't feel like things were being done right, and people didn't have more options, and I felt small business owners were being taken advantage of in our business, and specifically in rural America, where there is a lot of population and and some of the time a lot of minority population, that they just don't know what they don't know, and technology passes those rural areas by. It's not like going into Chicago or San Francisco. We don't want to focus there. We want to focus in rural America. So for all those years, I kind of collectively put everything together. I consider, you put the financial business and you put the technical business separately, it's a nightmare, right? You put them together, it's like an atomic fucking bomb, right? So because it's just chaos everywhere, right? And when you have chaos everywhere within our industry, you have a lot of people selling differently and doing this and doing that differently with no really true regulation behind it, or transparency. So when we wanted to start VizyPay, I kind of probably going into your next question anyways, is we said, well, how can we build an organization? I'm a true believer that you can disrupt an industry, not just by technology, although we're building it, but you can disrupt it by how you run that organization and how you represent that industry, overall. And I said, well, we could do all of them. We could do it all better. So we decided to, start our company with, our 3 whys and our focuses of culture, transparency, and being the voice for small business owners, specifically in rural America. And with the culture part of it, that is our number one. That comes before our clients. And the reason why is because, 63% of our staff are minorities, 27% of our staff are women, and 95% of our staff out of 113 come from outside the payments FinTech space. I didn't want a bunch of Austins running around that have 20 years. I wanted a bunch of people that are running this space, building great habits and holding us accountable of doing things the right way. And if you look at this space in a whole, it is not very diverse whatsoever. And women are, at one point in time, I felt they were non-existent when I first started. And not to mention, we always wanted to hire the good old boys that have been doing it for a long time. And that means no mindset change. So I said, we just have to disrupt it in a different way. And I was just doing an interview literally right before you with someone to work here. And I asked him, why would you want to work here? He's like, it's because you're the most, I've never walked into an organization where I saw all these walks of life and they don't all look the same, and, that makes me proud to do that, especially, me being obviously, a half Vietnamese or whatnot, to present that. And it is possible in our space. And that's where we want to disrupt it. And not to mention giving better options to small business owners in rural America that I do believe, need the help. I mean, we could put people on the moon, but they have dial-up internet still. How fucking crazy is that, right? So if I can do something in the payment space, which is a P&L line item for them to help them out, then I'm going to do my part, and our whole organization has bought into that idea. And I think that's one of the reasons why we continue to, kind of march at the same beat.
That's great. It's interesting you talk about culture, because I believe culture is incredibly important to a company's success. Also, the people that you bring on board and that they buy into the culture you're building and creating. It also can be used as a disruptive tool that you are doing something different than the competition. So when you go and you talk to a company, they view you differently because your identity is known for something that you have that other companies don't. I think it's hard to differentiate yourself in a space that there's a lot of competition. But what I'm hearing is you're in a market that maybe the big players aren't focusing on. So that's great. And your culture is focused on transparency, honesty, and delivering a product to make raving fans, which makes them want to come back to you. What is it that you're giving? What's the big benefit that these companies are getting from you when you come in and you say, hey, look, I got a new payment processing offer for you? What's the benefit for them to change from what they currently use today?
So, if you look at big markets, and I got to compare so you can kind of paint the story for you. You look at big towns like Chicago, San Francisco, New York, all these big areas, you're going to have great, robust systems like a Toast, which, by the way, is a great technology, right? But when you go into these small markets, these individuals have been with their same company for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Because number one, they don't have a live body that they see physically. We have boots on the ground. Number two is when they call in, they're not calling in to usually someone that is within the vicinity of them, which is within the United States. So they're reluctant to change. And when they're reluctant to change, they are reluctant to change because they don't want robust technology. They don't need it. Their population is not as big. They don't need all these bells and whistles. They just need to go from like a flip phone to a smart terminal, kind of concept, right? but they're still stuck in the world of technology that's old. So what we go in there and do is we present them with options at their organization or the small company to level them up from the technology they have now to the technology that we can provide them that is one step above what they have. We provide them a simplistic technology so that it doesn't take 5,000 years and to learn, because they don't need to learn it. There's no contracts like some of these big players will have for their big robust technology, and the fees are absorbent sometimes, like a huge, enormous for some of these individuals. And the problem with that is these individuals stick with these companies for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. Their rates are continually going up, and they're still getting hammered. They just don't know they're getting hammered. So we're giving them options to, eliminate what they pay for processing by getting ahead of the problem. We give them the ability to take advantage of the rules and regulations within surcharging if they want to do that in the states they want to do. And lastly, we're probably the only company in the nation that will cap and regulate our sales force on what they can charge a client if they decide to just pay the bill the good old way, like the good old square way or the good old toast way, whatever it may be. They can continue doing it the basic way they've always been used to. But we cap and regulate our whole sales force, never to be able to gouge an individual like I've seen time and time again in this industry. So when you present that with them, with a face and with someone they can call that has, like today, I'm looking at my board now, 18-second hold times. I think that goes a long way. Bill at Bill's Auto Repair is probably passing his business down to Bill Jr. You know what I mean? A lot of these are family-owned businesses are passing down generation to generation, or they've been around the block for a long time, and change is not something they want to do because they're scared of what they have to learn, and they don't want to pay a bunch of fees and stuff. It's, that good old saying, don't fix what's not broken, right? When in reality, it is broken. They just don't know it because they're inefficient compared to a big city, right? So we try to come in there and present that to them, and usually that, honestly, everyone says low-hanging fruit. That is low-hanging fruit, especially if you could paint that picture and provide them, options to really, help their business thrive. And I think that's what we do very well at.
It's great. Sometimes when you're paying for something online, you'll get an email back that says, look, if you want to pay with a credit card, you can, but you can also do ACH. If you do a credit card, you have a fee of an extra $3 or $3.50 or whatever it happens to be. And based on time, you just do it sometimes. And you're wondering, where is that fee going to? Where is it coming from? So if I'm a business owner, and I see at the end of the month, I've had, 5,000 transactions. In numbers, what are they really paying on average, you think, as a business owner for those fees? And are you bringing those costs down for them?
Well, it's two different markets, right? So if I walked 95% of the time or 90% of the time, if you went to downtown Chicago and you signed up someone, their effective rate probably is around 2 to maybe 2.6% of the volume, right? But you walk into a small town, it's closer to 3 to 5%, because they just, and by the way, that adds up very quickly, right? And they just don't know the difference. And again, that's where we come in and show it, because the people in big towns, well, they know the game, right? They switch all the time. They get a million people hitting their doorstep. Every 5 seconds, someone's walking and selling them something, especially in the payments world or the merchant services world, right? And that's where I think, again, we become a lot different in those markets.
That's great. You started 6 years ago. When you started, if you want to share this, you can. If not, don't feel not to. But what was revenue when you first started, and where is it today?
No, I'll be more than happy to share that. I think it's a story for maybe entrepreneurs that want to get into this business or start a business itself. It was shit, right? So the first year in 2017, it was, we made a whopping top line revenue of $97,000. And last year, we did 17.9 million. And this year we're on pace for 23 to 25 million. Totally bootstrapped the whole thing from scratch, from me door-to-door sales to, all the way to now 113 employees. And the crazy thing about it is I was just looking at our business plan that took me 13 hours to create about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. And they said that this year, the end of last year, my projected, I was very cautious with my business. It said our projected revenue last year was going to be 1.6 million with 10 employees. We did 17.9 million, and we walked into this year with over 90. And
wow.
So that's kind of how we started and kind of where we're at today. So
that's incredible. And the hires that you've made, are they remote? Are they local? Are they in-house? Where do they sit?
Majority of them are in-house here in Waukee, Iowa. The boots on the ground, which are the individuals that are going to sell these rural areas, our 1099s obviously are they're their own boss, like me anywhere in the United States, but the W-2s that work for organization, there are a handful that are outside and, bigger markets to go into rural areas with outside of our organization. So we mostly are in-house here. So
Hiring is tough. How are you what's your process in hiring? I know you said you just interviewed somebody. Are you hiring people outside the market, outside your industry, with a purpose of not coming in with the habits that you think aren't what you want to have in your culture? And then secondly, how are you finding them, and are they local, or are you flying them in and having them relocate?
there's some that we've moved and relocated. A lot of them have been local. Our hiring process is probably much different than probably anyone for the most part across the nation. I'm actually 95% of people who've ever been hired here I'm the last guy they see before they walk in the door. Another handful of individuals, are interviewed by maybe my business partner or whatnot. But ours are different. For example, if you hand me a resume, I throw it in the trash. I never look at a resume. I won't even know your name until I start probably interviewing you. And the reason why I do that is I don't judge a book by its cover. So that's one thing I never do when I interview someone personally. Once they get through the first hiring process of kind of understanding who we are and if they want to move forward, they get to me. And when they get to me, I don't know anything about the individual, nor do I want to. So the resume goes in the trash and I start from scratch. And I don't ask for strengths and weaknesses. I don't ask for college degrees or where you came from, what business you came from. I honestly talk about how they grew up from the ages 0 to 18 years old. And when I sit there and I ask them to tell me the story, were they a rich kid, poor kid, middle class kid? Tell me about your parents and your relationship with them. Where you grew up? Where did you grow up at? Were you bullied? Were you not bullied? Tell me about elementary. Tell me about junior high. Tell me about high school. And just kind of break that, that wall down of that preparation for that interview, right? They think they're walking in, the college schools taught them, the last jobs are taught them, you got to be precise and you got to do certain things, say certain things. I don't want the bullshit individual. I want the real individual. So once you break those barriers down, sometimes it gets very emotional for them, when they talk about, growing up, or when they talk about the goods or bad times, and when they talk about relationships. And then you really get to know their passions and what they've learned, what they've already prepared for me when I ask that question, if I didn't ask that question the first time. You know what I mean? And that allows me to really get to know them in a different way and set them up for what they might be walking into at our organization by being a very diverse culture. And we don't go hunting for veterans. And when I say veterans, I mean veterans within our space that have been around the block. We go hunting for people that have never heard of our industry, because I think those are the individuals that we need to open their eyes. We have forklift drivers here, warehouse workers that have worked for corporate people that found us. All walks of life have walked in here, and they are moldable, they're open-minded. And as long as you set them up for success and understand their story, it's so easy to get the most out of people. And then in return, they get the most out of us, right? Just like I was telling that guy today, don't get shit twisted. You are not on my journey or VizyPay's journey, right? We are on your journey throughout your process within our company. When VizyPay is long gone and 3 decades or 4 decades from now, you're not allowed to look back, in 25 years from now, 15 years from now. You better not remember our revenue numbers. You better not even remember how to spell our name, but you better remember the experiences you went through and the lessons you learned within our organization. If we did that as an organization, then we did the correct thing and we did it right.
Yeah, that's great. Wow. You don't hear that often from founders. I mean, you're truly serving the people that work for you and looking out for their future, because let's face it, people move jobs pretty quickly in today's world. 2, 3, 4, 5 years at a company is considered long-term. So that's great. Culture is so important. It's the DNA of a company. If you look at your company today and in FinTech and payment processing, however you want to define it, what's your core mission and vision of the company, where it's at today? And what do you tell potential employees that might want to join what it is?
Our core vision is kind of what we've outlined today with you. I kind of mentioned a couple of times is, continually to build out technologies to serve rural communities across the United States when it comes to small business owners. And allowing individuals that want to get into this space to learn it and not fear that you hear the word payments, you think I got to get some financial degree to be in this space. That's not true. If you maybe want to do heart surgery on me, I might want that, college degree. But I don't think I'm going to need it when I can. It takes about 6 to 9 months. I've been called so crazy for, why do you hire people that don't have experience? It takes you so long to train them. And I'm like, that's exactly the point. Is I don't want someone. I want to take that long to train on the right way to do this business. And that's allowed us to be very creative and innovative with some of the stuff and keep our focus, with how we started, which is, again, small businesses in rural communities. So
That's great. When you go from doing 97,000 in year one and where you're at today, for the founders out there, the entrepreneurs that are struggling to get their company off the ground or to grow, maybe they're a little bit in revenue, but they're not seeing that big leap or that. What was it in your company that changed? I mean, you went through COVID. Obviously, there was a lot of changes in how people had to, just survive, live, and their behaviors. But what do you think was the lesson you learned, and what was it that really launched you to the revenues you're at? Because that's substantial.
There's a lot of lessons that, that I've learned, especially initially. When we first started, we knew we had a clock. And, when you're a founder and coming out with business plans, et cetera, what I mean by clock is you have a cash flow clock, right? So when we were able to, generate, X amount of dollars, a little bit over $200,000, with me and, the partners and whatnot. And that's what we knew. I knew that to live the lifestyle that I have, that I created for my last company, and to also build this organization, you can't take money out of it, obviously, because you have no money to take, right? So that doesn't happen. So you have a clock, and the clock is how long can you survive before you go bankrupt, right? And what I mean by that is you have to be willing to risk everything to be an entrepreneur, number one, in my opinion. It can't be a part-time gig in my head. It has to be all in, and that's what I learned. And whatever budgets you came up with to launch your organization or company, double or triple it, because it's not the number you think it is. And you have to be able to wear every hat in the organization, all the, whatever job. Most people will create something and then want people to sell it for them. Some people want to, do this but not handle the customer service. I hire someone to do that. Well, we didn't want to hire anybody. We wanted to be able to do every job ourselves. So we had a very small crew, like 3 or 4 the first year. So, I was wanting to go door-to-door sales. I was wanting to do customer service calls, tech support calls. I was wanting to be the damn janitor, underwriting, you name it. I was going to do everything we needed to do. So then when the next wave of people came in, you were prepared to tell them exactly how it goes, and you can call their bullshit accordingly. And then you basically have them buy in because they know that you're wanting to not tell them to do something you don't want to do yourself. So as we started progressing and building that type of culture, we started getting a lot of output from a lot of people that worked with us that would double and triple their efforts to get us where you needed to go, And I always tell people, the first year or two, if you work for a startup, if you know how to spell the word vacation, get out of your vocabulary. If you want to take days off, don't even think about that. That doesn't happen, does it? You know what I mean? All those things mattered, especially at the beginning. I mean, it was all in or nothing. And you had to get individuals that bought into that same vision, which is very hard to find. And that's why you have to be very selective. But once you get those individuals surround you, then you're able to kind of really excel and delegate and have people focus on other things for you to get to that next level, right? We almost literally went bankrupt 14, 15 months into it, knowing that was the clock. And we got to literally the last hour mark, and we grazed by. And I mean, we grazed by not hundreds of thousands of dollars. We grazed by hundreds of dollars, you know what I mean, to survive. And that allowed us to, build that organization from that scrappiness. And I think until 2 years ago, we never hired in waves like we have done the last couple of years. We hired like one-offs here and there throughout the processes. Oh, our cash flow can afford Billy? Cool, dope. Let's go do that. Our cash flow can afford this. And then you just continue stacking accordingly and go from there. But I think there's a lot of things that go into it. But I know that Mark Cuban says it best, sales solves everything. I agree with him, right? That really solved a lot, especially me going out there getting sales. But I think there's so much more to that, to build initial framework, even though when it sucks, so when you get to that point, it's an easy turnkey, right? Not easy as easy as not hard work. It's just easier because you have more framework, right? So
that sounds to me like a pivot, like you understood like what you had to change to scale and to put the pieces in place, the framework, the hiring process, and also, going from hiring a one-off to hiring in teams or groups, or putting a process in place that allows you to scale with the right people. To me, sounds like somewhat of a pivot. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean,
from when you started to how you.
Yeah, our pivot. When we first started, it was a lot of 1099 independent contractors. Believe it or not, people will sell your stuff if you sell them on how to sell it, no matter what you're selling, right? And as long as there's a commission behind it, and they have no boss, and they feel like they can work anywhere, they can do it on the side, they can have a full-time job into yours. So we really maximize our 1099 channel, boots on the ground to sell our products and services. And then, like you mentioned earlier, COVID hit. And well, by the way, towards the end of that year, a lot of people lost their jobs. Therefore, we got tons of more resumes and people that want to try something different and not do the same old job. So they started giving us opportunities. And then that allowed us to get into the next phase, which was in the last year and a half, 2 years ago, which is hiring W-2 people that come into our office and, work for the organization, that are just not independent, that, are laser focused on our vision, laser focused on how we do things. So yeah, there was a slight pivot once we kind of get past that initial phase of, remember, independent contractors, they don't work, you don't have to pay them, right? You're only utilizing your time and effort to get them to buy into doing that, and rewarding them accordingly if they decide to actually go out there and do it. Now with a W-2, you don't sell, not sell. Even the training itself costs money because you're salaried, right, or hourly. So now but there's a different vision standpoint too by both, right? 1099s can have 40 million different visions for a lot of different companies. When you work at our organization at the W, you have one laser vision. We're all focused on the same thing. We're beating the same drum. So now we have a mixture of both as we've grown our organization. But that was kind of the pivoting point, knowing that's probably the right way to go, to have that more of a buy-in concept, and that's helped out a lot.
That's great. And unfortunately, there's nobody to truly tell you what direction to go when you pivot. Pivots can be hard, and you hope for the best. You sometimes bet the company on it. And, in our case as well, I mean, when COVID hit, every company started hiring remotely, which was great for us because now the talent pools didn't have to be in Silicon Valley or New York or LA or Austin. They could be anywhere. But then we started to get requests for, can you help us find people in Canada or Mexico or South America or Europe? And we weren't structured for that. So we had to figure out, okay, what do we do here in our pivot? And we ended up building a relationship with a company that now we're in 5 continents, and we can talk to companies and say, where do you want to hire? Do you want it to be, high skill, low labor cost? Do you want it to be in the US? Do you want it to be in different parts of the world? And now we can deliver that to them in an easy way, where in 48 hours they're interviewing and hiring people remotely. All the paperwork, all that stuff's taken out of it. And we would have never thought about that if we weren't forced to do that. But then it's also helped us grow, scale, and learn. So it's really cool to hear that, those little pivots, I think, don't really necessarily get talked a lot about, but it's inspiring for entrepreneurs to know that sometimes your path isn't the path you have to continue on. You have to change, and change isn't easy. Sometimes it's very difficult. But
yeah, we have a motto. We have a motto here, which is fail and fail quick. And because we're okay with people taking risks, we promote taking risks. We promote you failing. We promote you not being cautious. As long as you fail and fail quickly. And that's a lot of the things we've learned along the way, is being able not to be scared to fail, and letting an idea write itself out and before giving up day one, but still fail quick, right? So the writing usually is on the wall based on factual information, right? Your numbers or projections, are they matching, are they close, whatever it may be. But we're very big, even today, where we're at today, I have people always messing up and failing because they're always trying different things. And then once it sticks, we run with it, and that allows that creativity to happen within an organization.
Yeah, that's great. Man, you sound like you're all about your people and your employees, which is music to the ears for people working for you. I'm sure they're going to listen to this and go, okay, I landed in the right spot. And you're probably going to get a lot more people wanting to work there.
And by the way, we're not meant for everybody either. So there's a lot of people that would never work here because we are not structured, and we're just in a different mindset. So there's a lot of people that would, there's a lot of people that wouldn't.
Well, I can tell you, I mean, I've interviewed 20,000 people in looking for companies and roles for them to work at. And I can't tell you how many times companies have hired people. They love them. They have the right core skill sets. They have everything they want in that person, but they're a enterprise person. They've been working for big companies like Microsoft or any big company, not to point them out, but just any big company. And they're enterprise. They have all their systems in place, and they operate very well that way. But then you go into a startup where the systems aren't there yet, or you're building the plane as you fly it, and ultimately they don't hit the level of standards that those founders need because they're coming from a different background with a different expectation. So the culture aspect of it, if you're truly a startup culture where you're building things and breaking them and learning, and you're fast paced, that should absolutely be part of trying to assess somebody, like where'd they come from, where they're at, what are they comfortable in, what do they like and want, so that you're clearly aligning with what it is that you're offering as well as what they want, which oftentimes doesn't necessarily get all the attention it should.
Yeah.
Which sounds like you're absolutely targeting exactly what you want, which is really cool to see. The best business strategists out there say that 80% of business really is psychology, 20% is strategy. When it comes to psychology, as the leader, what are some of the tools that you use to stay positive in good and bad times and really to
Dude,
inspire others?
I think it's I think a lot of people don't, if they're starting a company or building one, especially in a position, that I happen to be in, which by the way, I hate the title CEO. I'll never do it again in my whole entire life because I hate being called the CEO. Yeah, I want to be, I want to be with the people. I want to be part of the people. And I think sometimes, when you see the CEO walking, you act different, or you go out and you act different. I don't even tell people where I work half the time when I leave here, nor do I ever tell them I'm the CEO. Right. So, but I would say, we go through emotional ups and downs too. I'm just as human as you, Jake, and I'm just as human as everyone else listening to this call. I have my emotional times of, overloaded or being stressed, etc. But there's a couple of things that remind me of why I need to show up. And actually it's really two specific things that, I remind myself every morning. One of them happens to be the people at the organization that have sacrificed so much at the beginning, and now even the newer people that are putting a lot of time and effort into this. I owe it to them to set them up for success, and I'm obligated to them to make sure that I make the decisions as the best interest for the company, but not for me. If it makes my life easy but hurts them, it's not the right move. If it makes their life easy and it helps them level up and it hurts me a little bit, that's the right move, right? And it's opposite thinking, a little bit. So, and then when you see the struggles of people when they start with your organization, if you are going to be doing a bootstrap or a startup, you got to remind yourself the why you started. And then it becomes the people that are helping you with that vision are the people that needs to be number one. So that's my number one thing that kind of keeps me, when I have a down day or when I just emotionally drained or whatever it may be, I remind myself why I need to show up. Number two is, my mom is a huge inspiration for me coming from Vietnam. So my whole entire life, she's been working at factories, seamstress. She works at a factory now, like I mentioned earlier, at 74 years old. She came from a foreign country to one of the greatest countries in the world. And her opportunity was diminished because she did not have all the stuff that I talked about earlier, which is degrees, or her resume wasn't long and her English was broken and all those things like that. So she was hindered for all her career in America because of those reasons. And she just wanted to make sure that she set me up for success. And I owe it for her sacrifices to do those things. My mom called me the other day, and I'll never forget this story. This kind of relates exactly to this question. She called me about, I call her every Sunday, but I called her probably 3 months ago, and she was excited. Mind you, she's 74 years old. She's on the back half of her life. She understands that life is going the other way, right? She wasn't just born again. And, so some of the calls are kind of a little bit depressing and sad just to hear. And I try to be there for her and motivate her. Hey, we'll get through this, whatever it may be. But she was excited. It's one day she was super, super excited. And I was like, well, why are you so excited, Mom? She's like, they finally did it. I'm like, what do you mean they finally did it? She was like, well, my company finally gave me a raise. I'm like, oh, that's awesome, Mom. You've been working hard. You've been there for 15 years. I mean, that's awesome. I'm like, what was the raise? And so for me, on my standpoint, I was furious when I heard it, but she was so excited about it. So I had to maintain a positive attitude. She got an extra 25-cent raise. Okay. After getting no raise for 3 years, she works in a factory. She makes $15.25. She's been there for 15 years. So for me to wake up in the morning and complain, to come to work and help people out and try to level people up and try to do those things, that is not something I'm allowed to complain about, right? But for her, that's all she's never known. That's all she knows. Is that's exciting for her to be in California, out of all places, making $15.25 is mind-blowing. But to her, it's everything, right? And it's because the opportunity she was afforded put her in a box, and that's what she thought she could do the whole time for all her years here. And I know better. So I owe it to her to show up, not only for my family, but the families of the people here and the people here, and also to show up for her. And she doesn't even know half the time why I show. I show up because she's motivated me enough to say, you know what, you set me up for better. I'm going to set the next people that I impact, for better, along with my kids. And I always tell people this, and I'm not sure who said this, but they said this, and I love it, is every single day I'm selling tickets to my funeral. So when I die, I want Madison Square Garden filled up with motherfuckers, right? I don't want my wife and 3 kids at my funeral. That means a lot of people I've impacted in a positive way will show up. And that's what I want. And I think that's what she would want from me as well. But again, her eyes are fogged to different things than my eyes are. And I think now I owe it to her and everyone else to make an impact. So
That's great. Yeah, and I was going to ask you what inspires you, but it sounds like you just answered the question. It's your mom and either your history, really. Oftentimes it's sometimes the past that gives you the chip on your shoulder that drives you to succeed. You can have someone that's got everything in life they want, and they end up, at Betty Ford, or they end up not doing what you think they should do based on what they were given, their education, whatever. But oftentimes, you read about the people that came from a different background and the opportunities in front of them, and they're relentless on achieving what they feel they didn't have an opportunity to achieve before, and they go after it. So it's really cool to hear that story, which isn't always known about company leaders. And there's a lot of challenges that go into building a company, but when you get the right leader, it influences the growth of the company, the people you hire, and ultimately impacts everyone. And by the way, you're inspiring others within your company that you don't even know sometimes, based on what your experiences have been and how you operate day to day, which is really cool to kind of hear. So if we look at this, you've had an amazing career, sounds like an amazing company. And if people wanted to hear about and learn more about you and your company, where should they go to find you?
We're very, very big on LinkedIn. Actually, that's one of the things that have actually helped us grow pretty substantially in the business world and within the payment space, etc. So just look up VizyPay on LinkedIn, and you'll get a vibe for our culture, the people within our organization that have voices themselves. Get to know them and get to know kind of our organization as a whole. But we live and breathe on LinkedIn. Most people say go to their websites. I say don't. And the reason why is because the art not going to tell you about, the voices of the people that run it. But LinkedIn will, because we allow them to go out there and build their brand and basically speak their mind on things they want to speak about, regardless of in our space or not. And a lot of our people take advantage of that. So to build clout for themselves and their voice. And I think that's very important.
That's great. It's a great place to go. Well, in terms of you, I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. What makes it great to work at your company, and what makes it great to work specifically for you?
Well, I think that two things you just said there: work for your company and work for you. I don't believe they work for us, nor they work for me. I think we work for them, and I think that's a big difference for me. Is they don't come work for VizyPay. I think VizyPay should be working for them. Our leaders, the people should be, getting people to level others up before themselves is one of the hardest things in the world to do, in my opinion, because it's a mindset break, right? It's all about me. It's all about me. That's kind of what we're taught and built like, I feel like, and to get to others to buy into leveling others up. So I think when someone, comes to our organization and maybe be employed by us, I think we work for them to make them better. They spend a lot of time in our office, 8 hours a day, even if it's minimal. A lot of bad habits can be built in an organization when you spend that much time there, and you spend more time with us than your family. So we owe it to them to help them build great habits to go home and be great husbands, wives, daughters, you name it, fathers, mothers, whatever. And then when it comes down to me, again, I don't want them to work for me. Please don't actually work for me. What you need to do is, work for your colleagues around you and work for, to help them level up and allow me to do whatever it takes to, even if I piss you off and hold you accountable, trust me, the intention is to help you be better. But my goal is never for them to work for us or work for me. I think the end goal is how do we work for them? And I think that in return, shines the light on small business owners and why they should do business with us or why you should work with us over time.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Really cool. Well, before we wrap up here, I just want to give a big shout out to Austin for joining us today and all of our listeners for listening. It means a lot to us that you chose your time to spend with us. My name is Jake Aaron Villarreal. I'm signing off now, but can't wait to connect with you all again soon on our next episode. Austin, take care. And again, good luck. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, buddy.
Before we wrap up, I want to give a big shout out to all the entrepreneurs that have joined to make this podcast possible. And for all the listeners for listening. It means the world to me that you chose to spend your time with us today. I'm your host, Jake Aaron Villarreal, signing off for now, but can't wait to connect with you all soon on the next episode. Take care. This show is sponsored by Match Relevant, a company that helps venture-backed startups find the best people in the market, and they do it in 3 simple steps. First, they sit down with founders to understand their story. Second, they tell their story into multiple candidate channels.
And third is schedule interviews within 48 hours. Find us at matchrelevant.com to learn more about how we do it.